I don't consider myself to be pro icon designer or anything, but I've always enjoyed doing it. So I designed some icons for UI3 at Figma.
You said that compared to UI2, the UI3 icons are less sharp. So what's the benefit of removing that sharpness?
The sharpness is really handy when you have a non-retina screen.
How do you even make an icon playful?
You're driving through a small town, you might see some more craftsy street signs or something, and that adds to the charm. So for example, the scroll to icon. If you squint, this could be an anchor. This was one of the first iterations, and it's overly organic. It's too complex. It doesn't really fit the rest of our system. But then this is where we ended up. So scroll 2 now has an anchor. It still has most of the symbolism of what it was before, but we made it fun.
Howdy and welcome to Deep Dive. This is your host, Jay. Today, we have Tim Van Damme. Some of you might know him as Max Voltar from Twitter. Tim, I'm super stoked about this project you're about to show us because I want to see how you redesigned all the icons for UI3.
That's giving me too much credit. Like when I joined Figma, again, UI3 was well underway. And they had already like a pretty large collection of icons designed both by people on the team. There was also a contractor that helped out. What I noticed was they didn't have like any guidelines written down anywhere. So one of my first projects I was working on needed a new icon, and I don't consider myself to be pro icon designer or anything, but I've always enjoyed doing it. So I took a stab. And obviously, the first step is go and look at the existing body of icons and pick up on what are some of the stylistic choices that they've made and the patterns that they follow. I did that, designed some icons, but also start working on some guidelines around how to design icons for UI3 at Figma. And then people are like, "Oh, he does icons. Can you do an icon for me?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll do an icon." I'm like, "Can you do an icon for me?" "Yeah, sure, I'll do an icon." To the point where, I don't know, I probably designed like 200 icons or something for this release, which is mind-blowing, but like it was just a fun process. And I'm proud of the confidence that people had in me and the trust that they put in me to oversee the icon system wherever I can.
So I think when you said there's already a large set of icons already existing before you came on board. So if we were to look at the before, which is the previous set of icons, when you just look at that, what are some things that come to you? Because you said that one of the first things you did is you looked at the previous set of icons. And I don't know if you like stored all of them in a file somewhere or you have a page with the previous icons, but I'm just curious to know, like, as someone who designs icon, what are some of the things you picked up on the patterns wise when just looking at the previous icons?
So it's a bit muddy. For UI3, there were icons, and then I built on top of that. I went back and tweaked some of the existing ones and then built upon the system. The big kind of like stylistic break is like between UI2 and UI3. So this was UI2 basically. And if we zoom all the way in, UI2 icons, basically, they have very sharp corners. They have straight endpoints. They have a 1 pixel stroke. Compare that to UI3, zoom in, and you find an example. Like UI3 icons they don't have sharp corners or sharp endpoints. They still have the 1 pixel stroke, but they're also very balanced. What I mean by that is when you look at all the icons next to each other, like visually they have a similar weight to them as well. Like you put them next to each other and not a single one is supposed to jump out like, oh, that one is taller, that one is wider, that one's like bigger or smaller. We push really hard to have a very like balanced system, which is fine if you're doing a couple of icons. To scale that across things, like even at this point I see things that could be more consistent but aren't, and that's fine. We're all human, and we all like we'll keep improving, obviously. But overall, this is a very nice set of icons.
What's the benefit of removing the sharpness? You said that compared to UI2, the UI3 icons are less sharp. So what's the benefit of removing that sharpness?
I think the sharpness is really handy when you have a non-retina screen, which is still most of the computers in the world. They just fill out the pixels a whole lot more. For this, I'm looking at the vector preview, but when I switch to pixel preview, you don't see a difference, obviously, because everything, like every pixel is filled out nicely. That's a good example here too. So as much as possible, everything is filled out. When you compare that to UI3, it's just a silly example, vector preview, you don't have, like you lose a bit of definition in the corners because you're not filling it out fully. What you gain is something that looks a bit more friendly because you kind of take the edge off, but it looks more human. It doesn't go crazy. Like it doesn't look overly cute or cuddly. There's a balance there. We do some playful things, which I can talk about later, but in the end, Figma is a tool that a lot of people use multiple hours a day, and we want to be respectful of that. We want to be mindful of that. So we want to give them a serious UI, a serious set of tools that they can use without getting distracted or without getting bothered by us trying to be too edgy or something.
How do you even make an icon playful? Like, how do you infuse some kind of personality to an icon? If you had to give me some example, like before and after.
Yeah. It's not, you shouldn't do it for every icon, right? The way I look at it is like, icons are almost like traffic signs. Like you're driving down the highway or any other road and you just get bombarded almost with traffic signs. And they need to be extremely to the point. They need to message one core thing, and you want them to be consistent. Imagine a speed limit sign changing from one sign to the other, like just a different design. Like you don't want to relearn, while on the other hand, if you're driving through a small town that exists maybe out of two main roads or something, you might see some more craftsy street signs or something, and that adds to the charm. So it's almost like a traffic thing. The more trafficked areas, consistency is key, and there's very little room for play or anything. We're all doing a thing, trying to stay on the road and follow all the rules, and we do not want to get distracted. We want to digest the information, the street signs feed us as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. But then a fun example, in prototyping, it's a bit off. It's not the highway. It's still a busy road. But prototyping needed I need to redo a set of icons, and then there was another set of controls that didn't have any icons at all. So this to me felt like, all right, this is where we can maybe start adding a bit of fun to it. So for example, the scroll to icon used to be just like, oh, you're at a point and then you go somewhere else. And what it does is you tell it to scroll to a point, and it's like an anchor. Like you scroll to some sort of like anchor point. If you squint, this could be an anchor. What if we actually turned it into, this was one of the first iterations, and it's overly organic. It's too complex. It doesn't really fit the rest of our system. But then, this is where we ended up. So scroll to now has an anchor. It still has most of the symbolism of what it was before, but we made it fun, I think, and hopefully it's like memorable. And prototyping it's a skill by itself. Like I can prototype simple things, but some people really push it and do beautiful things with it, and it's complex. So I was hoping to, bring a bit of joy to their daily lives.
I can tell you, I like this new conditional icon you designed more than the previous one. To me, it's very obvious. Like it's a condition because you got an X and a check mark in the new one. I think versus in the before one, it's, I don't know, it feels vague because it's leading to two pathways.
See, that's funny because that wasn't my idea. These were these were my explorations for conditional. And then I can't remember, someone came up with the idea, what if you actually communicate? Because when you look at these, like, looks like a share icon, like it's hard to tell from like where's the starting point, where do you go? And then someone suggested make it a cross and a check mark, and those are the two kind of outcomes. And that's just like an immediate, yes, that makes perfect sense. Let's do it. Let's not look back. Yeah, that was fun. But yeah, this is like another scratch pad. All right, we have a gamepad icon. My first game console was a Game Boy, original Game Boy. So yeah. I immediately went to, D-pad.
D-pad, yes. I've got a Switch, I know.
So yeah, it's again, you balance the visual weight of things. You balance, like, how does it look compared to others? Like, some icons live by themselves. Others always live within the same group of icons. These are good examples for prototyping. Like, these need to work together. And what's also interesting is, like, these explorations these are really tricky. Some of the mouse things, down, up, hover, click, drag, they're so tricky to illustrate in an icon what they do, what they mean. So sometimes the simple solution is best. And like stuff like this, it works because you will only see these together. So instead of looking at one icon and getting the full context of that, it is the collection of the collection of icons that tell a story together instead of individually.
So question there, like, why not just use like an arrow key? Oh, okay, I see the mouse leaving down. Okay, I see.
Yeah, there are many different concepts in prototyping that when you try to explain them, when we try to look at what they do, they're very similar concepts. So we still want the icons to be unique enough. So
going back to that gamepad one, the D-pad, I see that you finalized on the D-pad option, but there was another option in your exploration which had the whole console in there. Why did you not go with that one?
I'm an old fart, and I like the D-pad more. Yeah, it's the small things, like stuff like this makes me happy that I can be like, yeah, let's show the world that an older designer worked on these icons, maybe.
So would you say this is the benefit when you design icons like from scratch? Like you get to add this playfulness, make the meaning clear versus, let's say, grabbing an existing icon set?
Rolling with your own custom set of icons is a whole lot more work, obviously, because you have to create every single one. I think there are a lot of beautiful and extensive icon sets out there, and they work for a lot of use cases. But for apps as complex as Figma, for example, sooner rather than later, you'll need an icon that just isn't part of the set. And then you'll either need to contract someone to build it or build it internally. I think our approach here, again, it's more painful upfront when you look at the amount of hours that is needed, but it's more flexible. And I focused a whole lot on explaining the process to other designers and involving other designers in the process of creating icons and encouraging them to do their own. Like, many times a designer will approach me asking for an icon. I'm like, you can do it yourself. Let's do it together. Let me help you. Let me walk you through the steps. What do you think this icon should be? Like, you're the designer working on this particular project. I don't have the full context. What's in your head? What do you think it is, like, the right way to shape this to bring it to life? And then I'll work with them. And the next time, like, they'll have their icon ready to be added to the library, and it'll be perfect. It'll be pixel perfect. It will have all the stylistic choices that we made baked in already, and I could not be more proud at that point. I'm more proud of the icons that other designers add than the ones that I've done. Like, it's a beautiful thing.
I am embarrassed to admit to you that I've not designed icons. So what are the steps? Like, at a high level, if you had to walk me through one of the icons and show me the different steps you followed for that icon, what would that look like? Just at a high level, like just different steps. Like maybe first you sketch something, Or maybe you directly jumped into Figma and explored different iterations. Like, where did you even start for any of the icons?
It all depends on what type of icon you want to put down. Some icons are just like non-negotiable. People are used to seeing this specific icon for this specific action all across the different apps that they use, across the different platforms they use. Those are a no-brainer. Follow what's out there. People are already trained to recognize it. Don't make things more complex for them. The other end of the spectrum is like you have to design an icon that is so unique to what you're doing. Like, it's not out there. My first step is always I open Google and I'll be like, I don't know, share icon or whatever as an example. And like, what is the world doing? Obviously for a share icon, like plenty of patterns that you can hitch your wagon onto. And other times, like, I just get nothing in return. It's like, cool, now I need to invent an icon. And this is a presentation I gave internally at Figma to explain icons, the how and the what and the why and stuff. I have some photos here of my notebook. So this kind of goes back to, this goes back to the prototyping icons that we're just talking about. I'm like, I'll just sketch and sketch and sketch to get a better understanding of what works, what doesn't. And then, as you have seen with the prototyping icons, like, I'll do the same inside Figma, continue there. For me, stuff that's on paper, like, that's for me to help me figure things out, like which broad direction I think we should take or we could take. Once it's in Figma, then it becomes a communal thing. That's when people are invited for feedback, to riff and all that. Like, I have an understanding which direction we want to move on with, but yeah, paper and a pen, still the best, cheapest, fastest way for me to quickly rough some things out. This is where I go through the history of icons. It's not super extensive, but I do enjoy like doing these educational moments where people just listen and afterwards we have a whole conversation. I was supposed to meet Susan Kerr last week, but then I got COVID. That was a huge bummer. This is like a fun one. Going back to the tool belt we explored, I was like, what if we didn't have icons in the world? What would things look like? Because this kind of talks about the why. And sometimes an icon, like, they are the sole thing that you click. They communicate something, you click it, and they do that action, or the thing that you expect opens up. That works for simple concepts, mostly. When things get more advanced, the stuff that you see in the right click menu or like in a menu with many options, the role of an icon goes more into, it's a supporting role. Yes, you can read the text and you'll know absolutely sure what clicking that row will do. But here's an icon to, at first, help you understand the concept. If it's something complex, what's the difference between a mouse enter and a mouse down, for example? So at first they help you digest this list, and then later on they become the shortcut. Like 20 times in, you're not going to read all the labels. Your eyes will be scanning the icons because that's just a much faster thing to do. So like, I think menus with labels and icons are some of the most beautiful things in UI design. Like, they do so much and they cater towards beginners all the way to like advanced users and everything in between. They're so flexible, and they're so old, but they still work amazingly. I know some people like radial menus or something, like when Path did the radial thing, and people loved it, and like many reasons to love it. Like, my brain could not comprehend it. It was too all over the place. There was no structure to it. Give me a damn list. Again, I'm an old fart, but yeah, menus are awesome. And then went through, like, all right, what are our stylistic guidelines? Like, we have sizing guidelines. We have agreed on a stroke thickness, whether we use solid or outlined icons, what are the colors that we use, rounded endpoints, the border radius, stuff like that. There's more, actually, things that I should add. But again, like, anyone who looks at the icons that we have should be able to build on top of it. Going over the basics of like sizing, why things shouldn't be sized to a common max width or height or anything, because obviously you want to balance things. Fun trick here, just zoom out or squint. And if the blobs that you see are of the same visual weight, you're good to go. Complexity of an icon. Three of these have like similar visual weight, visual complexity to them. This one is, we love to add stuff on presentations. This one is obviously a bit heavier. And then just comparing some things like, cool, this is like what things were before, what they are now. And again, you can't give a serious presentation in this company. Things like always, we have a lot of fun.
I notice a difference here in the UI3. Things like as a viewer, like you look at the lock icon in UI2 and UI3, I think it's a millisecond difference, but I was able to grasp the concept much faster in the lock with the bottom part shaded rather than the UI2 where the whole thing is black and solid. Again, this is just my personal opinion, but that's what I felt.
Appreciate that. I didn't add the shading. Someone else suggested it. I was like, yeah, but I don't know. What else? Talk about metaphors. Another thing we talked about. Funny. When to use icons, when not to use icons, when to have fun, when not to have fun. These icons, I'm actually not sure if they made it in. Went overboard. These are some crazy abstract. Some are like things you would expect. Oh, I'm really happy with the highlights and shadows icons. Those I had to make up because I couldn't find a good existing like visual reference for it. But yeah, icons are fun.
What made you decide to design those? Like, what was the thought process behind the highlights and shadows with those two circles? I'm curious to know your thought process behind it.
I looked at a lot of photo editing software and the icons that they use. And it was funny, like things like exposure, contrast, saturation, temperature, and all that. Like they had like pretty similar icons in their own respective styles, obviously. But highlights and shadows, like I couldn't find icons that to me were clear enough, and I couldn't imagine that the icons that were being used were clear to other people too. So I'm like, I don't know. I went through a bunch of iterations. These are abstract, but I did enjoy what they communicate. Oh, there are two sides, the highlights and the shadows. This is about the highlights part. This is about the shadows part. These icons would not work by themselves, but you put them together, and even better, you put them in context with these other icons, and all of a sudden, yeah, you might start guessing what they mean.
I was able to get the shadow one. Shadow one was, I think it hit me right away because you got a smaller side, then on the left side, you got a bigger semicircle. So it was obvious that it's the shadow of that item on the right side. The highlights one, to be candid with you, I'm still trying to figure out, but with the text, it makes sense. Not trying to offend you, but just being very candid.
Don't worry. You won't offend me. It's all feedback. I take it all in.
But yeah, you're right. Like when I see, like now that I think about all the camera apps and stuff that I've used, they have a panel and all those icons look very similar. And that's exactly what you got going on there. Like the tint, the saturation, the shadows, they all look very similar. Like the style, the feel, like in that whole panel, it feels they're part of the same thing, which is color manipulation somewhat.
Yeah. Figuring out what works, what doesn't work, like where can you be different? Where does it make sense to be different? Yeah.
And I like that you also have if you zoom into the iteration where you don't have any icons, or I think in the iteration where you only have icons without the text, that one's hard to follow. Like when you just have the icons with no explanation whatsoever, this one's hard. Like, to understand what's going on.
And that's why you do iterations. Design is always about pushing it past the limit, pulling it back, realizing you've gone 360, but maybe you've only changed one tiny detail or something. I enjoy that process. It's very similar. Like the story is very similar, but the beats are different. The people involved are different. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tim, for doing this. I had a blast. Hey folks, this is Jay. It means the world to me that you watched this video. Let me know in the comments what topics you want me to cover in the future, and I will see you in the next deep dive.